Welcome to another episode of Going Solo, the weekly podcast for solopreneurs who want to make life and business work for them and not the other way around. I'm Dutkewich, corporate dropout turned business coach and someone who learns the extremely hard way what it actually takes to run a successful solo business. Each week, I break down the real strategies, the mindset shifts, and yes, just a little bit of woo-woo to help you build a profitable business on your terms. Because, my friends, I hate to break it to you, it is not the market. It is not your toxic ex-boss. It is not the algorithm. Who knew? It is what is going on between your two ears. And this week, I am beyond excited to be joined by the fabulous Shannan Schöbinger. Shannan!
Hello, so happy to be here.
Love it. I've been wanting to get you on for ages, so I'm very grateful that you said yes. So you are the people-pleasing exorcist. I love that.
Yes.
And you're the coach who calls BS on the performance of being good. So this week, we are going to talk about how to stop people-pleasing and start to make more money. But before we get into all of that good stuff, talking of making more money, I am running another free masterclass in a couple of weeks. I think it's about the 28th of May. And it is all about how I scaled to 30k months as a solo coach with no team, no apps, and who works 25 hours a week in less than 12 months, and how you can too. And I am going to break down all of the strategy, the psychology, and the woo-woo that changed everything. So wherever you are watching or listening to this, check the comments and that link to join is in there. The most common word in 2022 is gaslighting. And I kind of feel that like in 2025, it's like people pleasing. I'm hearing that everywhere. And so we kind of talk about it all the time, but what does it really mean? What does it mean to people please?
Yeah, it's definitely a buzzword, right? And we know that it's not helping us, and yet we still do it. And we don't actually know fully how to define it other than it's going against what we want, right? So we think that people pleasing is just like, oh, we're just being nice, having good manners. But it's actually rooted in something your nervous system learned very early on to keep you safe. So if you can stay agreeable and helpful, especially for women, it's non-threatening. And you'll be safe. You can avoid conflict. Maybe I'll avoid disappointment, rejection. But we're not just trying to please other people either. So this is something that we don't hear a lot about, is there are versions of ourselves that served us, let's say 5 years ago. And now we're someone a little bit different, still the same person, but we've evolved, but we're still holding ourselves to the same standards that we had potentially 5 years ago, or even before that, saying, oh, well, I need to do this to be successful, or you wanted this life. Why aren't you happy in it? You better just work on pleasing yourself. And so it's almost like, yes, we're people pleasing others, but we're also stuck in trying to please ourselves in a version we no longer want to be in. And it's not a fun feeling whatsoever. Yeah.
No, and we were just talking off air before this. Is like, this is really timely for me, because I'm always very open with people that kind of, I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I'm sometimes reminded that I have still got more recovery to do. And this week I was reminded of that. So I love that. I love the fact that, kind of in its simplest form, that people pleasing is going against what we want in the pursuit of being liked by others or a past version of ourselves. I like that. And again, and just that kind of how strong that feels is like, why would we do anything that goes against ourselves?
And it's
Yeah.
because we think, well, our brain thinks
Yeah.
that, oh, you're in danger. It doesn't know the difference between like being confronted by a lion
Yeah.
versus, sending an email that's assertive, right? And I love that you share that you're still, working on it. I am too, right? Like these are decades and decades
Yeah.
in the past that I have felt conditioning like many women,
Yeah.
with regards to, with the toys, like take care of dolls, take care of other
Mhm.
people. Whereas, we're getting better with the
Yeah.
gender stereotypes, but it still exists, right?
Yes.
And so it comes at us from a lot of different directions. And so like I know that really well. And it also can be a trauma response too, right?
Yes.
So it helped us survive. It absolutely did. We're
Mm.
just still acting like we're surviving, and it's keeping us from doing great things and making money.
Absolutely. Yes. And making money. And that's really important, I think, particularly for women. And those of us that that are learning to become who we really were before the world got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the lies that I used to believe was that I could either do good things or
Mm-hmm.
make good money.
Yep.
They were kind of mutually exclusive. And what I've learned in my age is that you can do both.
They can
Both.
coexist. Yes,
Yes.
both things can be true.
Yes.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you saw like the Barbie movie
Yes.
or like the morning show with Reese Witherspoon, and then another one, what was it? Oh, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, with Midge, which I love. I love that show. I need
I
to
love that
rewatch
show.
it.
I love her. I want her wardrobe.
Yes.
I want her
they
figure. Her
they
wardrobe.
all have these like classic monologues,
Yeah.
not classic but viral
Yeah.
monologues, right? So that women like fell in love with, like, oh my gosh, she's saying exactly how I feel, like in my bones. And they all have monologues that are similar, kind of how you were talking, Joe. I can't be too much, but I need to be
Yeah.
a little bit more, and I can't do this, but it's so those opposites, and they actually can coexist.
Yes.
And that just, yeah, I feel like I could do a whole master class on the monologues
Yes.
itself. Yeah.
So come back and we'll talk about the ands. All because one of the
Yes.
things you and I are always talking about is one of the biggest lessons that I think we've both had, and I think you can share the story about what you have about this word, but is kind of I I've always felt very contradictory, so very kind of ambitious and driven, quite a lot of self doubt and anxiety, and both of them has been as strong. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to partner with my brain and nervous system. That the ambition and drive is stronger than the self doubt, and that's like a life's work. And I'm really proud of
Hmm.
that. And occasionally, the universe wants to remind me that there is still work to do. And I'm not a quick study with like little shifts from the universe. I mean, like it likes to slap me in the face with a big wet, like 14 pound salmon. And I'm still picking off the scales from my cheeks. Um,
Same,
but I
same.
think, and so I think what's really important for me has been like, you both things can be true. You can be wildly ambitious and also anxious. You can be really excited about, and I see this with clients all the time, is they start their business like really excited, and then they start doing the work, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect that to feel like that. Like the frustration comes up, the self doubt. I'm like, yes, and you can be excited and frustrated. You can be full of hope and scared to death. So can you speak a little bit about, there's a word that you really hold on to, isn't there?
It's the and. It actually isn't in my, it should be in that corner, but I switched it the other day. But I have a big ampersand symbol, to remind me of that and to remind clients of that too, as both things can be true. We can absolutely feel more than one emotion.
Uh-huh.
And something that I really help my clients with is when you're talking about that ambition piece, and it goes back to people pleasing, is, well, if I'm too ambitious, doesn't that mean that I'm like not thankful for what I
Yeah.
have or not grateful? And like, I should be grateful, right? Yes, like you have, like we can say, yeah, I love my life. I'm grateful for it. And I want to keep evolving and doing
Yes.
big things, whatever it might be. But we get stuck
Yes.
in it's an or to us or a
Yes.
but versus an and. So I am a big fan of the and.
Me too. Me too. We are always talking about embracing the ands. Of like for a good solid 12 months, and I've kind of stopped doing it now because I think it registers in my brain, but like every time I wrote and, it was like in capital letters. It's like this and that and that. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe next year
I
we'll...
still catch myself where I'll say either or but, and I'll be like mid through, it's one syllable,
Yeah.
so not really midway through, but I'm just like, oh, and I mean, and.
And I just want to go back a little bit to, I'm so struck by that going against what we want. And again, that society, particularly as women, kind of from a young age, I'm a little bit older than you, but you kind of were very much almost like children were to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, I was the oldest and a firstborn female.
Same.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother podcast.
It sure is.
First daughter syndrome is a whole nother podcast.
Talk about people pleasing, though.
Oh, but yes.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting about that role in the family, your position in the family,
Mm-hmm.
and then what you're expected to be, let alone then all the other life circumstances that happen, but
For
just
sure.
by nature of birth position. And it's so interesting that kind of, and yet I think men don't particularly have that. And we see it kind of all the way through politics where kind of an assertive man is like strong and commanding and a protector. A smart, intelligent woman opens her mouth and she's a nasty woman. I had a pillow with that embroidered on, nasty woman. And it's just such a double standard, isn't there? And it's like, it's not, it traditionally has, and I think to a large extent it still isn't, but it traditionally hasn't been safe for women to not go against, we've been conditioned and expected to go against what's in our interest for the sake of everything else. We are the kind of sacrificial, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We are all talented in self-sacrifice, for sure. Yes. I spoke to this not too long ago, but it's coming up, is not to get not to be like a downer, but when you read obituaries or when you go to memorial services and things like that, when they're women, you hear a lot about how selfless they were and how they did for others, but they're kind of missing in their own memorial and obituary service. And for men, you just don't hear as much of that. It's like they actually potentially like lived their life and enjoyed it, and that's celebrated. And there's an absolute double standard. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be missing from my own memorial or obituary, right? Like it's one thing to like help and have an impact, and there's another thing to be selfless, like literally less of self. I don't want that. I don't want that.
No. Yes, and I think I completely agree. And it's like, thank you for all the sacrifice. And it was recently Mother's Day, and I was seeing all these cards which said like, thank you for all the sacrifices.
Yes.
I'm like, yes, and can we get to the point where as women and as mothers and business leaders, and I have this conversation a lot with female clients, is like, stop throwing yourself on the bomb. It's like we tend to like, our job is to, which is obviously metaphorically, but we try and do the right thing and protect everybody around us, and I'm guilty of this, by throwing ourselves on the bomb and kind of taking the explosion. And everybody else is great and fine. We're in 97 different pieces and like falling from the ceiling. And it's like, I do think sometimes there is an identity and we identify with kind of a bit of martyrism, that like, look how much I sacrifice. And we would, because society supports it. But I do think we are complicit in that. And I think that's a conversation we need to have.
Yeah, we are. And, we glorify busy, we glorify exhausted. Burnout is real. And also it's becoming glorified, like, oh yeah, I'm burned out. But like, what are we doing about it? And it's not all on the owner. It's not all on the person, but like, yes, I completely agree with what you're saying, Joe.
Yes. One of the most, I don't have visceral reactions to many things. There's a kind of meme that's going around Facebook which says something like, no one's going to have more impact on your boss has more impact on your mental health than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's like those things go viral, everyone's jumping on, and so true, and so true. And I'm like, like, do they? I feel like there is another person in this that probably has more of an impact and has responsibility, and that is you.
Yes.
And it's like, and I'm not saying that as a judgment. I'm saying it as like, don't give that you're giving all of your power and your mental wellness, just like a primary tool, in my opinion, to somebody else who might not even register because they're worried about the KPIs for the quarter. It's like,
yes.
Yeah, I think that's part of it as well. That kind of giving ourselves going against us.
You bring that up, and I actually have a quick story about that. In one of my previous orgs, that meme or whatever it was brought up when we were doing kind of like almost like a wellness assessment for the org, and I pushed back and I said, well, like, yes, your manager has influence on you, sure. Like, managers hopefully are good managers, and that's a whole other discussion too. However, if it's impacting your wellness that much, whatever the meme is, I forget the percent, but it's very high, then you are attaching your career fully with your identity. Like, what hobbies do you have? Like, what do you enjoy? Like, and so we got into this really big, like, existential conversation in this small group. But I was a little bit of the anomaly, the pushback of like, I actually, like, yes, this is true for many people.
Yes.
And there's something wrong with this. It shouldn't be true.
No.
We got to change that.
Yes. And I think one of the conversations I like to have with people, and it's not a very popular conversation, is what is our role? What is our part? What is our contribution to our own suffering? And I actually think it's often, not always, it's often in equal measure, if not more, than the other person or the other incident. It's like, so the trauma happens, somebody's a dick, whatever it is, and we suffer.
Yeah.
And we're human. We get to wallow for a little bit. And then we kind of, the story we tell ourselves about it, we then cause our own suffering all over again, and like tenfold. I always tell the story about an organisation I used to work for, whereas for over a 4-year period, I was accused falsely of bullying by this, I'm going to say gentleman. It's the kindest word I can use. And there was like nothing to it. I hardly knew him. Like, this guy was really struggling with his mental health. And they did the right thing. They investigated and they found that he'd made it up. It was vexatious and great. So, and they did nothing. They sent him on a course about it was like an online course of how to control your anger. I'm like, don't you be worried about the impacts on me, dude. Anyway, this went on and he just, because nothing would happen, he was just felt emboldened, and he wasn't very well. He needed psych treatment. And I was told, you are a manager, you are the senior person, he is a member of staff, we hold you to a different account. And I'm like, that's great, and you can't be making stuff up and then just ignore the other person. And he was like emailing everyone in the organisation, like saying things about me. It was a whole ride. I had like 1-year-old at home and things. And anyway, after kind of 4 years of this, I sort of went, hang on, there is bullying and harassment, and it's the other way around. And they investigated again, and like they apologized, and they brought in lawyers, and the lawyers said, this person was paranoid and delusional. I'm thinking, you knew that 4 years ago. And it really took a toll on my health. For lots of reasons, it took a toll on my health. I had a miscarriage, and separate to that, for 3 weeks, I couldn't get out of bed with like depression. And then one day, I don't know where it came from, but I suddenly realised that I was complicit in my own suffering And most of what I was feeling was because it was my responsibility that I didn't have my own back, if that makes sense. And that was
hits
when
hard,
that was when I could let it go. But it was like, for that 4 years, like, I just went along with it in terms of, because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to be the difficult one. And, you know, as a female, to think that we're not liked, people think we're this, think we're that, and then to see it in paper, and then not to have our own back, like, that was such a lesson for me that bad things happen, and we are also responsible for the suffering that we added to.
I completely agree with that. And it's taken years for me to recognize that as well, because that would have irked me many years ago, being like, don't blame me. And it's not a blame. It's not, because it is something that I think when we hear that, we internalize it as, okay, there's like shame and there's blame and there's guilt attached to that. But how I view it now, and I'm able to, after a lot of inner work, is, well, no, there's actually, like, if I have more control over something, there's possibility, good news, I can change it, right? It's not that someone has full control over me and I have no say about it. I can actually do something about it, depending on what that is. But yes, I don't have quite the experience you did. And I have many questions about it, but I know that's not the time or place.
That's a rosé conversation.
Yeah. But I was, at another organization, I definitely was experiencing burnout. And yes, there were like systematic things that were not helping it, but my people pleasing was absolutely getting in the way. And I went to another role, and I then realized, oh, it's me.
It's me.
And
yeah.
And so I feel like that's an Adele song or something. I don't know.
I think it's Taylor Swift. It's me. It's me. I'm the problem.
There you go. And so I had to confront that. And like, yes, there were some systematic things, but there was a lot of me feeling like I needed to keep over delivering, not believing I really had a seat at the table. So I would go over capacity, all from a place of honest fear of being a fear of disappointing people. When then you think about it, you're like, well, what's the worst can happen? But it's something as a little girl, like, especially going back to like being the oldest, I know it impacts other people too, not just the oldest girl. I get that. But you just did not ruffle any feathers. You just stayed in line. You were the emotional support. You were so mature for your age, and you carry that with you in very, very sneaky ways that show up.
And it's so interesting because it kind of, I mean, every time I watch the podcast, there's always a point in where I go, I'm 47. That is this point. So it kind of, I'm 47. And one of the really interesting things is I'm noticing, and I'm a pretty robust adult these days. I'm pretty resilient, and I don't love the word resilience. For lots and lots, a whole other podcast.
We've got so many episodes.
Maybe we need to do the Shannan and Joe show. We'll call it the Shannan show.
Shannan, love it.
Shannan, like Brangelina. It could be Shannan. And what's been really interesting now is I'm starting to kind of claim I had this conversation with a friend the other day. I always felt I hated the word resilient for lots of reasons. And recently I've been recognizing, actually, I am really, when I say other people's reaction to things, I go, actually, you are really resilient. And I've really been taking that power back of, I'm really resilient. If that makes sense.
It does. I also have a love and hate relationship with the word resilient, because there are situations where we were forced to be resilient, we didn't ask for. And for that, I like to say like that I, experienced hardship and did what I needed to do to get out of it, survived, right? And then the things that I have a little more, I think, control over, I'm like, yeah, I was resilient as hell there. Like, go me.
Yes.
And I think that's just different. So I think the circumstances that
Yes,
match
I
it
think so.
is where that love and hate come
I
from for
think so.
me.
I think so.
Yeah.
I actually texted a friend yesterday and said, for the first time in my life, I got into bed the other night, and just so a couple of things had happened, I got into bed thinking, I'm really resilient. And then I remember pulling back the covers and getting in and going, I'm a badass. And it was like kind of the first time I realised quite how I had ever said out loud, like quite how badass I am. And I
Ooh.
think badass you are. And it's like I always see it in other people.
Uh-huh.
And I'm always reminding other people of their own badassery. And I
Mm.
didn't realise that was like the first time I'd ever said it to me.
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
was so cool.
Well, and I
Yes.
think we like associate, I don't know, I used to associate that word with like people that were like really loud and
Yeah.
out there. And I'm not that person. I'm bold, but I'm not loud per se, and introverted so much.
All the best
And
people are.
yes, and I feel like some introverted leaders are like the very best leaders along with like the most badass leaders,
Yes.
right? They're smart too, super
Yes.
strategic and observant. But for whatever reason, that badass word is just, I associate with
Yes.
everything that's not that. So I never associated myself with that until, again, I'm doing a lot of inner work and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm resilient. I'm badass. I
Yeah.
got this. Like I'm the people pleasing exorcist now, right? That didn't happen overnight.
No. No, no, no. So, and I love that the people pleasing exorcist because it is because it. And the reason I like the people pleasing exorcist is kind of to this is where my grammar is going to let me down, but to kind of have that exorcism, it's almost a violent release.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Exorcist movie is not a like, please leave here, oh, off I go. It's like a violent resistance. So,
Yeah.
so why is it that it is so difficult to kind of release this people pleasing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we're rewarded for people
Oh,
pleasing.
yes.
We're rewarded for it. Um, Especially like ambitious, high functioning individuals, you might have gotten the
Mm,
promotion, the award, the recognition, and you avoid conflict when you're people pleasing. And that is, what is that? Like is that negative reinforcement? Oh,
yeah,
back to psychology 101, my undergrad days. But like it feels safe. It
yeah,
feels good in the moment. It's more of that like immediate
yeah.
feeling good. And so our brain tells us, like, don't change this. This is working for you, even though you're not, because you end up just fully exhausted, burnout, and super resentful.
Yes. And what's one of the things that's been really interesting to me very recently, is that one of the one of the ways people pleasing has been showing up recently for me, and that has surprised me, is in how much I over deliver. So I kind of pride myself on, and this is something I'm really working on. I pride myself on going above and beyond what any other coach will do. And
Hmm.
I have this real identity that I'm not like the other coaches. And I think that bit is really healthy. I'm not like the other coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm cool with that. But the second piece I've strapped on is I go above and beyond. And this extra bit, this over delivery, I've kind of been thinking it's because I'm not like the others. I will do this and this and this. And actually, this other piece is just people pleasing 101. It's just
Yeah.
like me, you can't, I'm trying to, like, you can't possibly ever be disappointed. You can't possibly feel anything other than glowing praise and admiration for me because look at everything I do for you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's come up recently is how I've noticed that sometimes by over delivering and kind of not being clear on the boundaries and by kind of holding hands so much, it actually not only doesn't work for me, but I was used to self-sacrificing, so I didn't even notice my part of it. But the bit that made me notice that part was it was actually disempowering others.
Yes.
And that really took me by surprise. So it's almost like in my over delivery, in a couple of circumstances, I created this kind of entitled, powerless victim. And like that was a shock. That was a real
Yeah.
shock. So can you
Yeah.
tell me about how that kind of shows up and why?
Yeah. So it's great that you recognize that, first of
Yes,
all.
it's that fish, it's
Uh,
that salmon.
yeah, just envisioning that. Anyway, I feel like we could do an AI photo of that. Maybe I'll have some fun later, Joe. Okay.
Okay, so my question is kind of the normal ways people pleasing shows up in kind of, we think people pleasing is about not saying no, not setting boundaries,
Ah,
kind of saying yes, we want to say no. What are the other ways as kind of we get older and we kind of take our businesses and our ambitions to the next level? How does it show up like in those circumstances?
got it. Got it. So besides just saying no, because we
Yes.
all know, like, yeah, we probably should say no a little bit
Yes.
more. Well, so a lot of different ways, but some of the things that come to mind is like for solopreneurs, right? Like, oh, I'm going to offer them a discount, but they didn't even ask for one.
Yep.
But thinking, oh, let me do that because I think I'll sell it faster, which you won't. It doesn't
Nope.
work that way.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. And like what you were just talking about, over delivering. So offering to do extra. No one asked you to do
Nope.
extra,
Nope.
but you're doing it to try and prove your value and then unintentionally disempowering somebody else to be able to really kind of thrive in what they're growing to do. Um, and then another thing that comes to mind is, and I know we've talked about this, is like being available all the time. So I know you've recently switched your schedule.
Yeah.
Especially when we're passionate about what we
Yeah.
do, whatever that might be, we say, oh, well, we'll just extend this and we'll be there for that person. And then, like, our calendar starts to open up a little bit more, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more. And then we're like, oh, I'm not feeling so great. Oh, I wonder why.
Yes. What could it
Because you
be?
keep bending, but it happens in little increments,
It's
right?
that
It's
slow
not a
boiling frog. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And so that's what comes to mind as well. I'm trying to think if there's other things. I mean, there's definitely other things.
That boundary creep, I think is
The
really
boundary creep for sure. Oh, and then, as a solopreneur, holding back on social media, being
mm,
like, well, I don't want to be too
yeah.
promotional. That's not me. I need to be humble. Well, y- you're got good stuff to offer. Like,
Yes.
don't quiet it down because people need you.
Yes.
And so I feel like we absolutely are, instead of just saying no, we're just silent a little bit more
Mm,
than we want to be, or
yes.
a lot a bit more, actually. And I've absolutely been there too. So when I first started coaching, I tried to give it away for free, thinking, oh, well, tons of
Everybody's going to
people.
want it. Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? People didn't bite.
If
I
you
thought it
don't
would
value, why? If you're not valuing it, why would some random stranger? Yeah.
exactly. So, as I started to one charge, but then also raise my rates, the higher my rate goes, the more people I attract,
Yeah.
and they are way more committed.
Mm-hmm.
It's that energy
It is.
piece. And what you just said is, yeah, like, because when you're charging, not that money is attached to your worth, because that's
No,
just not a
because
thing, but
you can't charge what you're worth because we are invaluable.
correct. You're
Invaluable.
priceless, not
Yes.
free,
No. No.
priceless.
No. 100%.
And so when you start charging, though, those higher values, people know, oh, she knows what she's talking
Mm-hmm.
about. She values what she's offering. She's not looking for that external validation. She already knows, that she offers it. And when you do kind of that lower price, people question,
Yes.
or they're just not committed.
Yes.
And you're not
And I
going to want
think
to coach
that's
them.
really one of the phenomena I've noticed recently. Not always, but there is a theme of the people that pay the full price and pay in full versus the people that pay a reduced price over 6 months. The pay in fulls are easier every time because they've invested in themselves, they take it seriously, they're not second guessing themselves. I have never ever, I'm very, very fortunate in terms of 99.9% of my clients rave about me. They love it. They've got results.
Mm-hmm.
Point one, which is like always breaks my heart, but point one of the people, it is always somebody that I reduce my rate significantly for and always gave a payment plan over and above what I always give a payment plan. And that's so interesting. It's always where I've broken my boundaries and often where I've ignored my intuition. That's a
Yes.
whole other conversation. But even
Yes.
without ignoring my intuition, I've always broken the boundaries. I've always done something special for them than somebody else, thinking that I was trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I couldn't even satisfy them then
And
because it was
people
never
please,
about
and
that.
yeah, and your
Yeah.
people pleasing cost you
Yep.
money,
Yes.
time, energy, and
Yeah.
joy.
Yes. All of the
Right.
above. All of
Yeah.
the above.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we weren't aware enough to catch ourselves, we'd then be thinking, we could risk thinking, oh, it's because I charged too much. Or, oh, it's because I did this. We could internalize it and take, if I hadn't got a load of other clients paying 10 times the amount and paying in full, I
Mm-hmm.
could have gone, well, this means this about me. No, 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 no. This means this about when you question your own value and you
Mm-hmm.
regade on your boundaries. And that's, as I said, I think we said this offline, but the universe is never subtle with me
Yeah.
because
Me
I
neither.
assume I'm not a quick study as far as the universe is concerned. So whenever there's something I need to learn, that's when it like, woof. So
Listen,
interesting.
yes, I am an absolute believer of signs,
Yeah.
and but like I need the big
Yes.
signs, like neon signs, tarot cards,
Yeah.
like give me the card that I need that'll make sense to me. And it's
Mm-hmm.
happened, but yes, I need the big flashing lights for
Yes.
sure.
And I actually had this conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Pip, the fabulous Pippa Hayward, yesterday.
Love
About
Pippa.
we love Pippa, and I said to her because something had happened, and I said, why couldn't they have taken themselves out quietly? Like, why was it such a fuss? And she said, if they had taken themselves out quietly, you wouldn't have heard the message you needed to hear. And
Mm.
as soon as she said that, I went from being like wanting to vomit with like anxiety and people pleasing injury to what a gift that was. And it literally released me from the situation.
Hmm.
Um, yes, so no, loud signs from the universe.
Yes, yes. Lessons to be learned always.
We should do another one that's about what the sounds look like and what happens when you ignore them.
Oh, yeah, I have a lot of those.
I was going to say, I'm like planning this whole Shannon
Yeah, we'll have to
podcast
go back
series.
through the recording and the transcript and be like, okay, this topic, this topic.
And so, kind of, I always think, and we talk about I actually really loathe the word boundaries, and I don't know
Yeah.
why. I think it's just not true. I don't know why do we say that as women? We say, I don't know why. I know exactly why. I know exactly why I hate the word boundaries. It's because it's over talked about, it's overused and
Mm-hmm.
understood, and also it's kind of we think that it is easy to do. The reason people don't put boundaries in isn't because they don't want to put a boundary in, it's they're not prepared for the emotional cost and the implication and other
Mm-hmm.
people's reactions when they do, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. So
it
why is
does.
it that setting kind of boundaries and, not going against ourselves and raising our prices and disappointing people, or we need to come back to that disappointing people, why is that so difficult and so gut-wrenching, particularly
Mm-hmm.
for women?
Yeah. Well, it feels risky, right?
Mm.
So being clear on what we need, how we're showing up, what we want, that's never really felt familiar or
Mm.
neutral. So it's definitely new. And I like how you said setting boundaries, because I think that we all are actually pretty good at setting
Mm.
boundaries. It's actually sticking to them,
It's the honoring them when it
the
gets off.
honoring them, that is where things get very sticky, because people will push back,
Yeah.
right? So this is where that discomfort comes in with, okay, you say, I'm not going to people please anymore. I'm going to set this boundary. I'm going to stick to it. And then when you get potentially one
Yeah.
response, that's not something that you wanted to hear or read, you're like, uh-oh, I'm doing something wrong. But the thing is, it's uncomfortable for them, not actually uncomfortable for you, but we
Yeah.
confuse that. And your nervous system is just kind of in havoc. It's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? And so we just avoid those feelings of discomfort because they're unfamiliar, when really we need to act like it's like training like our muscles, right?
Mm.
So if you think about like doing reps and getting stronger, you need to do it multiple
Yes.
times. You're going to be sore. It's not going to feel great in the
Yeah.
moment, maybe, but you will
And
get
you think you will
stronger.
die. And then
Yeah.
that's really important. It's like at various stages, you think you're not going to make it. You think this is death. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, I cannot do
Yeah.
this. Like literally, maybe you're trying to like lift something. You're like, I really
Yeah.
can't do that. But you can. You work up to it though,
Mm.
right? So depending on where we are when how we're feeling with setting a boundary, setting and maintaining a boundary is bold in of itself as
Mm.
a woman, and do something that is your building blocks. Because I think, especially for ambitious women, we're kind of like all or nothing. Like, I'm going to go really big, I'm going
Yes.
to go above and beyond. And we do that with boundaries
We
too, and
do.
then we're
We
like,
do.
we got slapped with a fish. Like, what the
Uh-huh.
heck?
Twice.
um, and so we need to not go big per
Yes.
se, but not go big per
Yeah.
se, but more so, okay, what's feasible, what's going to feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but I can like kind of sit with it for a little
Yes.
while and then build upon that, because the more you do it, the less terrifying it's going to become.
Mm.
But we got to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable anyway. That's the thing I always say to people. It's already really, really uncomfortable.
Correct. Like, what
And
is
it's us that's taking the discomforts.
you have to
We're
ask
selling
yourself, what is
ourselves
this
on the bum.
cost?
Yeah.
What is the cost?
Yeah.
Is the cost, right? So choose your hard a
Yes.
little
Choose
bit.
your hearts.
Yeah.
I like that. You want to go big and kind of stand firm. Um,
Mhm.
yes, so interesting. What was I going to? Something came up. Oh, yes, other people's feet. So one of the reasons for me, I can't separate people pleasing and wanting to control other people's feelings.
Ah, yeah.
So kind of, I always tell people I was kind of raised with Catholic guilt minus the Catholicism. I just got the guilt parts. And I remember I was probably about 7. This is how Joe's brain works. So I was probably about 7 or 8 at junior school, infant school. And there was an assembly, and we had, if you've seen Harry Potter, there was like
Mhm.
different houses. So you had like ruby, emerald, sapphire, and topaz, like 4 houses.
Mhm.
And I don't know, sapphire had got the most house points that week. This is like 30 years later, 40 years later, this is still like ingrained in my brain. Sapphire had got all the house points. And then I was a member of Ruby, I think.
Mm.
And Ruby booed the Sapphire house.
Oh.
Now, in England in the 80s, like, you don't boo people. Booings is for football matches. And so the teachers were like horrified that we were booing Sapphire. And I didn't boo. I'm a good girl. I didn't boo. And they took everybody out. They took the whole of Ruby, the house of Ruby, outside in the corridor, and they lined everybody up against the wall. And they said, I still remember this, they said, we know exactly who booed. They didn't, but they said this. They said, we know exactly who booed, and if you own up, you won't get in trouble. But if you booed and you didn't own up, you'll get in real trouble. So I hadn't booed. One of my friends, Kelly Jones, next to me, little ginger, fabulous little ginger spitfire. I knew she booed. So she's standing next to me. I'm here. I'm like the tallest kid in the class. And I put my hand up that I'd booed, and I hadn't booed because I didn't want them to think ill of me, thinking that I'd booed. So I'd rather admit to something I hadn't done than them to think poor of me. Kelly Jones, on the other hand, had booed her head off and was like, and like, that is my brain, that I will, and that for me, that is like throwing your, and that continued for 30 years onwards. And like that, for me, that was like, I will sacrifice myself so that you don't potentially think badly of me. And it's never other people. And then one of the things I talk to my clients about is we're never really worried about what the other people feels about us. What we're really worried about is what we feel about us.
Yep.
And that's, for me, that's the bit that always comes up, that when we're people pleasing, we think it's about us not wanting other people to feel badly about us. It's about us feeling badly about ourselves.
Yeah, it comes down to not trusting ourselves.
Accepting and loving exactly as we are. Yes. Oh, I could talk about this all day. I've not mentioned Kelly Jones's name for 40 years. God love you.
KJ.
If you're listening, Kelly Jones.
Hello.
I admire your chutzpah. She's probably leading some Fortune 500 somewhere.
Probably.
Yeah. So how is it that people pleasing costs us money?
Yeah. So people pleasing. Okay. Hold on.
Many ways.
So many ways, because it's costing us money. Okay. So it's costing us money in ways of, I'm gonna go woo-woo here, but when we go, if we're people pleasing all day, but we're feeling like crap, we are low energy, resentful, kind of sitting in that victim martyr mentality, we are not going to attract what we're wanting whatsoever, right? At all. Even if you're doing all the things, you're putting in incredible effort, like that content you're putting out there, oh, so good. But you know what? Because I have been here. You're like, what is happening? And then you're like, oh. So yes to that woo bit.
Yes.
And it's costing you money because you're not showing up for yourself. So it comes back to that conversation we were having about, like, people know, like, your energy, people will feel through LinkedIn, through the screen, through this podcast. And they're going to think, well, she doesn't think very much of herself in whatever kind of way. Why would I want to work with this person? When you're overly available, when you're overextending, people are going to say, why? Why is she doing that? And they're going to shy away from you. And the people that you might attract, you do not want. They're going to take advantage of you fully. Those are some things that come to mind.
Yeah, so for in addition to all of that, one of the ways I see that kind of people pleasing costs us money is we think that we lower our prices. Number one, we lower our prices. Yeah. We don't go after promotions and kind of bigger financial opportunities. We will negotiate on our prices. We will let people out of contracts when we've done our bits and they didn't do their bits. And because we don't want the fights, we go keep the money. You know, that happens all the time in business. So we know now that people pleasing is going against what we want in the pursuit of being liked. And we know that actually the more we give, the less it helps.
The less we get, kind of. Yeah.
I learned that this week. The more you give, the less you get. And that is so, because I think the reason that is because we are giving from a place of lack and scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when we give from a place of boundary, it's like it's not questioning the worth. And I think that's why that happens. So, and we know that it's costing us money and all these things. So how can people work with you to exercise that people pleaser once and for all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mainly work with ambitious millennial women on people pleasing and so much more. But when it comes down to it, building a life that feels good, not one that just looks good. So women that are feeling like a shell of a person, and they're just not sure where to go from there. They have ambition, but the momentum is not quite where they want it to be. And so, because I was there about 5 years ago, I designed a program called 90 Days to Unapologetic AF.
Love it.
And it's a very high touch experience. So, you're going to get a whole lot of me. I'm not over delivering, I've got my boundaries.
Just enough of you. Just enough.
And you're going to have community. So we've got one-on-ones, group coaching, community, a workbook, all that fun stuff. And you don't need to change everything. Do I have clients who have done career pivots and things like that? Absolutely. Have they come to me for that? Not necessarily. I've also had clients that they don't come to me for more money, but they make more money, because when you show up for yourself, the universe shows up for you.
Almost as if it's connected.
It's almost, yeah. It's almost like I know what I'm talking about. No. But they've gotten like 3-5 times their return on investment, just in a few months of working together. And so I have this program. I've got a few more slots available, and then I'm going to be looking at a wait list, because I want super high quality, of course. And I do have a masterclass coming up next Tuesday, May 20th. It's called How to Build a Life That's Rich in Time, Energy, and Joy Without Changing Everything. And we're going to be getting into a whole bunch of juicy stuff, including a Your Rich Summer playbook that we're going to talk about. And you'll have some tools to leave with, so you can start making real changes, not changing everything, but real changes right away, to have a life that feels good. And I want to see you there. So let's come hang out.
I love that. And that's such a relatable experience. I remember when I was at the top of my corporate career, particularly in my 20s, I had the red sports car, I had the corner office, I had the paycheck, I had the suit, and on paper I was living the dream. In reality, I used to have to pull over twice on the way to work because I was vomiting with anxiety. So having a life that feels as good as it looks on the outside, that's incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes it's unconventional, because we were talking about earlier, was we are trying to please a version of ourselves, either that once we did want, or it's what we were told we should want, but we never actually wanted it. So it's getting real honest with ourselves, but not doing it alone. That's a huge part of it too, because this is deep inner work, and it can be fun, and it's hard. So you want women who are in the trenches with you, so to speak, supporting one another. Yeah.
And one of the things I see consistently with my clients is that community piece is so important, that knowing we are not alone, being able to see that there's nothing wrong with us, and that our struggles are everybody's struggles, and having to be held in that kind of sacred space by other people. And I actually recently changed the name of my community from kind of who were in the arena picking glass out of their knees. And I deliberately changed that to kind of the high vibe tribe, because
which I love,
of the frequency.
Yeah.
And it's yes, we are picking glass out of our knees, and we're the high vibe tribe, why we do it. And just that. And what's really interesting is, even just, I think I only changed it a week ago, and even just changing the title of that group did something to the group. They
Yeah.
went from like, we're in the arena, we're in the trenches, to with a high vibe trait. And it's like,
Yeah.
I literally we have like people like sharing with other people who are in the air flying to Europe, and like they're getting like 10K weeks. So like clients are just dropping on there. And that's because they've changed their vibration. So
So
yes,
true.
unapologetic AF. So masterclass on May the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will drop your details wherever they're listening to this. I'll put a link to how you can work with Shannan.
Absolutely.
Shannan is incredible. She's fantastic. I go to Shannan all the time when I need a bit of a reminder of how to not forget myself in all of my goals. And one of the things I always tell people is, in my diary is very, very busy. One of the things I have in my diary from working with Shannan is like, I have like, I call them Shannan buffers, like non-negotiable breaks throughout the day. And then it's so interesting because very occasionally someone will say, well, can you see me? And I'll fit them in. And without fail, I regret it.
Every single time.
Every single time. Yes.
Yep.
And then I'm really miffed at the end of the day. I'm so tired. I'm like, but you did that. That was your choice. Yes.
It was a choice. It was a choice. Yeah.
Because it was more important for me for them to think, how wonderful is she?
Mm-hmm.
Than for me to go outside or eat some lunch.
We're all still working on those people pleasing.
We're still working on it.
So we are.
You need Shannan. Shannan is fabulous.
Thank you, Joe. And I feel the same way. And I hope to be on the podcast many times over with all these other topics, having fun chat.
And a whole different podcast as well. So thank you for coming so much. So if this episode resonated with you, and if it didn't, go see a doctor because you may be dead inside. Share it with a fellow solopreneur, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, somebody who needs to hear it. And if you want to create a wildly successful coaching business on your terms, by mastering the strategy, the psychology, and the woo-woo, check out my coaching programs. And remember, just because you are going solo, it doesn't mean you have to go alone. We've got you. Until next time, take care.